This is an important word. Less, less, less. Do not say less. I think you should be using the word fewer. Fewer.
So, on Wednesday, we had another debate. A lovely Democratic debate. All anyone's talking about is how Bloomberg got destroyed. But also, the last question that was asked before closing statements.
We are less than 2 weeks away from a national primary. And I want to ask all of you this simple question. There's a very good chance none of you are going to have enough delegates to the Democratic National Convention to clinch this nomination. Okay? If that happens, I want all of your opinions on this. Should the person with the most delegates at the end of this primary season be the nominee, even if they are short of a majority? Senator Sanders, I'm going to let you go last here because I know your view on this. So instead, I will start with you, Mayor Bloomberg.
Whatever the rules of the Democratic Party are, they should be followed. And if they have a process, which I believe they do,
I'm trying to do
so
this
that
yes or no to make it fast.
everybody can.
So you want the convention to work its will?
Yes.
Senator Warren.
But a convention working its will means that people have the delegates that are pledged to them, and they keep those delegates until you come to the convention. All of the people.
All righty. Vice President Biden?
Play by the rules.
Yes or no? Leading person with the delegates, should they be the nominee or not?
No, let the process work its way out.
Mayor Buttigieg?
Not necessarily, not till there's a
Senator
majority.
Klobuchar?
Let the process work.
Senator Sanders?
Well, the process includes 500 superdelegates on the second ballot. So I think that the will of the people should prevail. Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Most votes should become the nominee.
5 no's and a yes.
5 no's and a yes. That is all of the Democratic nominees aside from Bernie Sanders, none of whom have any path to victory aside from the undemocratic rules process of the convention, invoking the rules process of the convention in self-serving fashion. Yes, Bernie's answer is also conveniently self-serving, but it is also the right answer when it comes to the question of, should we have a democracy? Should the Democratic Party be tied to the will of the people when it comes to the nomination of its candidate? Because the rules as they are after the first vote, the superdelegates come into play, and the delegates are not tied to the votes of the people that they represent. They can change their votes. Some of the arguments that I hear in support of this rules process is, oh, well, Bernie only has less than a majority of support because the field is so populated that there are many options to choose from, and perhaps nobody will get a majority of delegates needed. And the split among the quote-unquote centrist voters is greater in total of a percentage of votes cast than Bernie's, or even Bernie and Warren's combined, which is silly because that's not how people vote. People do not vote strictly ideologically, especially in this country. Information voters have varies from person to person, and there's a lot of low information voters. There's a lot of people who vote based on things that are strictly non-ideological, and sometimes idiosyncratic and contradictory. Earlier in this debate, for example, somebody asked Bernie Sanders about a poll that said most Americans would not think of supporting a socialist candidate for president. In that same poll, Bernie Sanders won in terms of which candidate should be the nominee. But he's the socialist, ostensibly, so how does that make any sense? It's because it's not an ideological response. Let's just go to this guy. He works for Elizabeth Warren's campaign. He gets asked some very straightforward questions and gives the most basic talking points in response that are easy to tear down. And I'll explain.
Interesting. Last question for you, Adam, on the contested convention. Elizabeth Warren didn't commit to backing the candidate with the most amount of delegates as the eventual nominee. Does that mean that she's hoping to be a consensus candidate at a contested convention?
I wouldn't read that much into it, but I don't really find this conversation terribly interesting, but a couple things are worth noting. One, as with the rules in Iowa that landed in a weird place, were pretty much written by the Sanders people on the Reform Commission. Right, so it's a little bit weird for anybody to be contesting that. Second,
He starts off immediately by like, oh, I wouldn't read that much into it. It doesn't take a lot of reading into what she said. She has virtually no path to victory. There's no way she's going to garner a majority of delegates. Her answer, which could have been yes or no, as the moderator asked, she chose to clarify, stating that she's holding on to her delegates until the convention. She's in this for the long haul, and pretty much all of them are. And the odds of Bernie winning it outright or nobody winning it are virtually even at this point. So there's not much to read there. He's simply denying it. That's a denial. And then he says, oh, I don't find this conversation very interesting. And it's like, no, of course you wouldn't. You don't want anyone to actually talk about, the player in the game, Elizabeth Warren, and how she plays the game. That's distracting from your campaign. It's not interesting for you as somebody who's promoting a campaign to talk about it, of course. But the third thing that he actually says is his first thing is, the rules were written by the Sanders people. That's not true. Simply not true. The Unity and Reform Commission was made in the aftermath of the 2016 convention because of the fracturing that it did to the party to coronate Hillary Clinton. And then she went on to lose, which did even more damage to the party. But point being, the Unity and Reform Commission was made up of Clinton people and a few Sanders people, probably 8 out of 24, maybe a third, proportional to the delegate distribution for Hillary and Bernie, respectively. Which means Bernie didn't even have a majority of people on that commission that were in favor of what he actually wanted in terms of rules. Changes to the convention rules, changes to the DNC. All of that, everything that came out of the Unity and Reform Commission was a compromise, including the superdelegates, because Bernie Sanders would have gotten rid of superdelegates. Of course he would have gotten rid of superdelegates. He wants the will of the people to determine the nominee. But party leaders were completely losing their shit. They do not want their power challenged. They do not want to lose their status. They do not want to lose their influence on this party to Sanders people who are not friendly to them. Well, I mean, they're friendly to them, but let's face it. If Sanders becomes president, a lot of these people are not going to make as much money. This guy doesn't want to talk about this because it's not good for his campaign. And insofar as he does, he only has talking points that he has to lie about. Such as, oh, Bernie people made up the rules, so why are they complaining? Ridiculous.
It's a progressive principle to have ranked choice voting.
It's a progressive principle to have ranked choice voting. He's talking about ranked choice voting for delegates, for superdelegates. He's talking about ranked choice voting after votes have already been cast by citizens who have not made ranked choice votes. Their ranked choice is not what he's talking about because we don't have that process set up, obviously. We have a winner-take-all system that until now was totally fine, but now that Bernie's running away with it, all must come to an end. Oh, we need more democracy, ranked choice voting amongst party elites so that we can get the broadest supported candidate, not some divisive, polarizing figure like Bernie Sanders, as Mayor Buttigieg made a point to say, annoyingly, a dozen times last night. So this guy is representing a campaign that is making the same talking points as Pete Buttigieg. That is Elizabeth Warren's campaign and who is a part of it right now. And that's why a lot of progressives who support Bernie Sanders are very unhappy with Elizabeth Warren. She's proven herself to be a player in this game, as she said, verbatim, in favor of tweaks around the edges and working within the party system and Washington's system to make changes. Now this guy goes on to say some more direct things that I want to cover.
I don't think it is acceptable to have a Democratic nominee who only has the support of 25-30% of Democrats. We believe in ranked choice voting. We ideally would pass it nationally. And I think...
Ideally! Oh, we'd love to. Democrats, we love ranked choice voting. We have never mentioned it before 2016 when progressives started bringing it up. But now we just, Democrats love that shit. Democrats just inject it into my fucking veins, man. That's how much Democrats want that fucking ranked choice voting, bro. They couldn't give a fuck about ranked choice voting for you. They only want ranked choice voting in 2020 because it's convenient for the party, not for you. Fuck you is what he's saying, because your will doesn't matter. Only the Democratic Party's will is what matters.
Bernie Sanders' only point last night was that superdelegates should not be voting, but he actually didn't even say the delegates as a whole should not be voting. So look, I think this will be part of the overall effectiveness argument.
Oh, if Bernie Sanders didn't, it was a yes or no question, and Chuck Todd's trying to hurry up to a commercial, but Bernie Sanders didn't bother to say that delegates shouldn't be voting. Even Bernie believes in ranked choice voting. What are you talking about? This is silly and uninteresting. Get over yourself. Bernie believes in ranked choice voting for the voters. The delegates should follow the will of the people that they supposedly, ostensibly, represent. There's no way in hell Bernie Sanders would support delegates contradicting the will of the people to support a candidate that has broader support amongst the Democratic Party. Whatever that means, however that's measured, that's the main problem with this. There's no tally of votes or some kind of data that you can crunch and say, okay, the will of the people has been ultimately fulfilled because the broadest support amongst Democrats goes to this candidate. Even though this candidate got less than a majority, less than 25% in all likelihood, of pledged delegates. And that is even more absurd than what he's trying to say is absurd about just picking the winner of the most delegates, of the most votes. Any way you try to cut this just ends up worse and more undemocratic than simply the inconvenience of having to choose the person who got the most votes and the most delegates. If we had the ideal, as he said, the ideal of ranked choice voting on a national scale, then we could have what he's talking about. And if you want to push for that, my dude, I'm right there with you, man. Let's get it nationally. Let's lock that in. Let's do that. Let's fight for that. You support Bernie. When it comes time, you throw your delegates, or Elizabeth Warren throws her delegates behind Bernie. And man, I guarantee you Bernie will fight for that ranked choice voting. But that's not what this guy wants. Not in reality. Only for this election, for specific party members, does he want ranked choice voting, and he won't admit that that's what he's talking about.
It will continue to be there with Bernie Sanders and that Elizabeth Warren started last night. That if you want someone who's a bold progressive, she's the one who can actually get it done. She is the real deal progressive, and when she touches things, they don't fall apart. They usually get better, like she did with the CFPB. She didn't fight for the same things for 30 years and lose. She came to Washington with one core priority, the CFPB, passed the crown jewel of Wall Street reform into law, had many other victories. I think that will extend to the arguments in the days ahead.
But
just jabbing Bernie for really no good reason. Other than, I guess, Crystal, he knows is a Bernie supporter. And he knows this is kind of a progressive-leaning show. But yeah, his line there, that Warren hasn't been fighting for the same things for 30 years and not getting anywhere, is the same tired old attack they've used against Bernie since 2016, really. He doesn't get anything done, he's a purist, he doesn't know how to work with people, his accomplishments are very little in Washington, even though, forget that he's the amendment king, forget that he's raised wages for workers, forget that he's, fought for transgender rights and LGBT rights when it was a political third rail, and Democrats could give a fuck about LGBT people. Bernie Sanders was turning Burlington into a trans mecca. What else did he say? Okay, she did the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. How's that doing, by the way? How's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau doing these days? How's her theory of change that you can just, reform the system from within and all will work out? You see what a success story the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was. And it was. It has returned billions of dollars to defrauded Americans. And that is a success story in its own right. It's coincidentally the very thing, the only thing, the one thing I repeatedly hear touted as to Elizabeth Warren's accomplishments. So if Bernie has 0 and Elizabeth has 1, I'm not saying that's the case, but if that's the case you're making, it's not very strong. But the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been completely shackled. It is a shell of its former self in terms of enforcement because of the Republicans. We didn't reinstate Glass-Steagall. Dodd-Frank was weak sauce. And the Republicans are able to chip away at that legislation and carry on with business as usual with nothing much changed because the reforms were so weak to begin with. Bernie Sanders is going to be the one going into this fight with the goal in mind of Medicare for all, Green New Deal, raising a minimum wage, reinstating Glass-Steagall, ending corporate tax loopholes, raising taxes on Wall Street, speculation, and billionaires, and the corporations. And if he gets even 1% of that done, if his entire agenda, it will be more than what Elizabeth Warren has or will have done if she did happen to become president, I think. And I only say that because look at what Obama did. He started with the public option, immediately caved on that, and then still passed a right-wing healthcare plan. And the whole time, the Republicans were saying, he wants to give you socialism. He wants to give you socialism, communism in your healthcare. He wants to take away your choice. He wants to put your grandparents on death panels and kill them to control costs. They will throw the book at you no matter what you do. You don't show your cards up front. And that's what all these centrist Democrats, everyone but Bernie, is doing. Is saying, hey, look, we all want the same thing. Look, we're all going to get to universal coverage. It's just going to happen. It has to. The Republicans have to listen. They don't. But they do. We'll say they do. They don't. And they won't. We've seen it. Mitch McConnell does not respond to this kind of shit. He says, fuck you. Eat shit. And nobody does anything. Bernie Sanders is the one who's saying, I'm going to go to Kentucky and tell them, hey, Mitch McConnell doesn't want to give you health care, and see what they think about that. And if the president comes to your state and is telling you, hey, your senator's a piece of shit, a lot of people are going to listen to that. And that's what these people are afraid of. The politicians in Washington and all the consultants, all the careerists out there, don't want this kind of primarying, this kind of shaking up of things. It's all instability to their careers and their prospects of wealth growing and projecting themselves into some kind of success that they can make for themselves. It's not about serving you or creating policy or anything like that. This whole thing, this whole machine just attracts the worst fucking people. And so we've got the worst fucking people in politics, and these are the fucking people trying to prevent a Bernie Sanders presidency. And that's why, no duh, he should be the only one who's getting your fucking vote. As far as president goes, like there's nobody else. Nobody else with these kind of enemies, this kind of consistency and these goals for the people, for the working class, this kind of union backing, this kind of fundraising, small dollars, the only guy without a super PAC. Even Elizabeth Warren now, who said that she won't have a super PAC, is taking money from super PACs. The unfortunate matter of it is that they all fucking do it. Except Bernie. And that's why he's the real deal progressive and not Elizabeth Warren, like this schmuck is trying to fucking tell you. Screw this guy. This guy's terrible. But even worse, it still gets worse.
Shouldn't the candidate with the most votes end up being the nominee? I mean, Democrats have been talking for 4 years about the popular vote and how the will of the people should decide. Isn't it going to destroy the party, essentially, if you have Bernie Sanders come into the convention with a plurality of delegates and then it gets taken from him by superdelegates on the second ballot? I mean, that is going to destroy the party.
It's very perceptive. Crystal Ball asking the right questions. And she rightly brings up that ever since Hillary lost, Democrats have not stopped reminding you that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes, and she should be president right now. And that's true. If we had a system that made sense, that honored the will of the people, as Democrats will conveniently say when it, supports their fucking biases, then yeah, popular vote, yeah, the candidate with the most votes should win. Duh. Duh. And now she proposes this hypothetical, which is not exactly a hypothetical. It is the last-ditch effort that the establishment Democrats have to take to stop Bernie. It was in the cards all along. It was the reason they fought so hard to keep superdelegates on the second ballot, was to prevent something like a Sanders nomination. There's no doubt about it. And this guy is going to immediately do the one thing that, of course, is just, I don't want to address this question because it's a good question and my answers cannot be good, considering what I've already said thus far and what Elizabeth Warren has already said. So I'm just going to question the legitimacy of the question to begin with. Just dismiss it outright and deflect to some talking point yet again. So here we are.
Yeah, let's not feed conspiracy people online, Crystal.
How is that a conspiracy? Your candidate admitted to it on the debate stage last night, as did all the others.
No, that's a preemptive stirring of the pot. The person with the most support.
Preemptive stirring of the pot, says this fucking perpetual pot stirrer jabbing at Bernie and such. Fuck him.
Should be the nominee. It is not okay to win the Democratic nomination on a technicality, which is what some people are trying to do.
On a technicality, says maybe he hasn't said it, but the Democratic Party has been claiming, and Pete Buttigieg has certainly been claiming, that he won Iowa. And that was purely on a technicality. They were reporting it based on the state delegate equivalent. And the way that figure is calculated is completely, it's calculated in some very esoteric way that voters really don't understand. The fact of the matter is that the most votes, yet again, the candidate with the most votes, who we should say won, was Bernie. Bernie won Iowa. But in terms of state delegates and the state delegate equivalents, a technicality, one might say. Because of that, the Democrats and Pete Buttigieg are claiming victory for him, and not Sanders. But that doesn't matter because Sanders didn't win. He's not going to win. According to these people, Sanders won't be the nominee. And even if he goes into the convention with a plurality of delegates, it's not enough. That's not enough support. Despite the fact that no one else has demonstrated that they have more support, that's not enough.
In a six-way race, if somebody is blocked at 20, 25, 27%, that you cannot argue that they are the choice of Democrat. It has to be a ranked choice voting principle where the Democratic Party can look at, as a whole and say, who's our best bet to win? Who can we all unify around? I don't see how you can...
So give us ranked choice voting.
That if at the end of the day
we'll
it
agree.
Is true that only 25%, 27% of Democratic voters want one person as a nominee, they should be the nominee. That just seems a little bit weird to me.
But I think it seems a little bit weird to say that a candidate who did even more poorly than that should be the nominee, though.
Yeah, again, ranked choice voting. Do you or do you not agree with ranked choice voting?
But that's not the system that we have set up. I mean, that's not how this is all structured.
There is a principle set up. It just shocks me sometimes when Sanders people talk about one principle and then fall back on another.
We live in reality, dog. Your principles only matter insofar as you are purporting a policy, insofar as you are putting forth an agenda and saying, this is my philosophy, this is what I want to accomplish, this is what I believe in. When it comes to the mechanisms of how the process, the convention process is going to play out, we are talking mostly in hypotheticals, but this is not exactly outside the realm of reason, of possibility even, let alone probability, because the support is just not there for anybody else. So this principle he's leaning on, by the way, only conveniently leaning on to spite Sanders people, like Crystal here. He just leans back on that so he doesn't have to answer the question. The only answer is the person with the most votes wins. So, vote Bernie. Don't fuck around. These people are going to steal it if you don't. And if you don't believe that, look no further than this schmuck here. Look no further than every candidate but Bernie saying, democracy, though? If I'm losing? Fuck that shit, bro.